Ni Tanse Kwekwe Sego Wache. Hello, good morning. My name is Laura McPhee, and I am the co-chair of the Two-Spirit Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Advisory Committee. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a proud member of Pikwakanagan First Nation. And I'm very excited to welcome you all to our sixth and final meeting of the term. And I'm also going to ask for your patience and understanding as I navigate being the chair for the day. I know that this is a change, and I'm excited to be here with you folks. The committee secretary has confirmed that we have quorum, so we will call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting in committee room number 1 at City Hall, and also using the city's WebEx technology, with members and staff connecting by video conference or calling in. We ask for your patience with any delays or technical issues as they happen. Members of the public are welcome to attend this meeting in person or can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. We do not have any registered speakers today. I would like to request staff to keep their mics muted and your video turned off unless you need to address the committee. This is to make it easier for me as a co-chair and for those watching along on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on agenda items. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. If members wish to ask questions of staff or to speak, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand, or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. Please note that certain interactive features of WebEx, such as the raise your hand, is disabled, so I will need to see a physical hand go up. The chat feature has also been disabled as a communication tool for meeting participants and may be used for technical troubleshooting only. Any chats you type will go to the technical support team, and they will support you in whatever needs you have. When voting on an item or a motion, I would ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. If there is a recorded vote, you will be asked to state if you're in favor or opposed. Members, I want to remind you that although we are participating remotely, we must still submit our motions in writing. The clerk staff are available at 2slgbtq@toronto.ca to help with motions. And although some of us are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Lesbian, Two-Spirit, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer Advisory Committee acknowledges that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is also now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we acknowledge that this land is covered by Treaty 13 and with the Dish with One Spoon wampum belt, and we thank them for their stewardship of this land. I will now call for declarations of interest. If there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, if you would like to declare an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know and indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last committee meeting on February 10th, 2022?
So moved, Councillor Ainsley.
Great. I have a motion from Councillor Ainsley. Thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Wonderful. Okay, the motion carries. We will now proceed to consider the 7 items on the agenda. The first item is item QS 6.1, the chair's update. Okay, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank former Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, who is also the former chair of this committee. Former Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam has resigned from City Council to pursue other endeavors. I would like to propose that as co-chair, I send a letter on behalf of the committee to the former counselor to convey best wishes and the committee's appreciation for her leadership, service, and accomplishments towards the advocacy of two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer issues. Members, do you have any questions for me on this item? If so, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Yes. Leslie, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I appreciate the letter going forward from all of us. I totally support it. Kristen has done an amazing job, and now so are you this morning. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Miigwech. Are there any other speakers for this item? Questions? And I'll also ask if there's any speakers to the item who wish to speak to it. You can raise your hand or unmute.
To the chair, one moment. We have a member in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. So, hi,
Great.
Susan Gapka here. Oh, the screen looks wild. Hi, can you hear me, folks?
We can.
Testing. Susan Gapka, she, her pronouns. I'm in the room. I really wanted to be back, so we're trying to figure this out. But I sent an email a little earlier, and I didn't hear if oh, there we go. How does that work? Hi. I haven't set up my Zoom on my laptop yet. That was a letter to go, and I'm just wondering if we could make this into a motion, and I'd like to move a motion that I don't know if this is a motion or not, but I'd like to turn it into an official motion to thank the councillor for their service and helping establish the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. City staff, I believe you can help us turn this into a motion.
Hi, Madam Chair and members of committee. Yes, we certainly can display a motion that has been prepared. Madam Chair, if you could please kindly ask for a mover for this motion. If it's Susan, then that's fine. We can have that as well.
Thank you.
Great. So can I have a mover for this motion?
Leslie moves.
Oops. I actually moved the motion, but I'll second the motion. Can you see me on the screen? Oops.
Sorry, people disappeared as the screen got shared. So to whom was speaking again? Do you mind raising your hand for me?
My apologies. We'll figure it out. We're all trying to sort this out. Oh, there we go. So Susan Gapka, I'd like to either move or second the motion.
Great. Thank you. So we have got the motion moved by Susan Gapta. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. With that, I'll move on to the next item, which is item QS 6.2, an update on the gender equity strategy. And I will welcome Kara to speak.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. And so, clerks, I believe I no longer am able to share my screen. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, members. It's really a pleasure to report back to you on progress made on the gender equity strategy. And this morning, I'm going to give a brief overview of the progress that we've made to date on creating the gender equity strategy, discuss what we've identified as city staff as our strategic objectives and priority areas, and open up the floor for your feedback, comments, and discussion. So just a little bit of a background to give you a refresher. The gender equity strategy has two key objectives: to identify and reduce gender inequities across the corporation and the City of Toronto, and to improve the quality of life for women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ+ residents of Toronto. The overall aim of the strategy is to help city divisions implement an intersectional gender equity forward in the design of policies, programs, and services. So please bear with me. I am having some trouble switching my screen. There we go. I'm hoping you can see that. Perfect. So what have we done so far? In addition to doing a great deal of research, background analysis, and jurisdictional scans, the main source of data for the gender equity strategy has been a wide public consultation with the relevant populations in Toronto. The public consultation process for women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ+ residents was coordinated on behalf of the city and the Gender Equity Unit by Social Planning Toronto. In the consultation process itself, conducted by Social Planning Toronto, we had a total of 1,078 women and 2S LGBTQ+ residents having participated. And between the public consultation process and additional stakeholder interviews and consultations by city staff, more than 1,100 stakeholders were consulted to date. In addition to taking an intersectional approach with the strategy, relevant populations served by the strategy, ensuring that we cover all complex and diverse intersecting identities, the strategy itself, from a policy perspective, will be aligned with all other relevant equity-related plans and strategies of the city. So this includes, but is not limited to, the Reconciliation Action Plan, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, the Housing TO Action Plan, the Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism, the Childcare Service Plan, Safe TO, and the forthcoming Data for Equity Strategy. As a result of all our consultations, putting the entire process together, we have identified the following strategic objectives and priorities, which we are hoping to get feedback on from this advisory body: driving an equitable post-pandemic recovery for women and 2S LGBTQ+ residents, improving employment and income security, enhancing service access across the entire city and all divisions, improving homelessness services, shelter and housing pathways, improving access and equity in childcare services, comprehensively addressing gender-based violence, planning and building an inclusive and accessible city for all residents, supporting the process of truth, justice, and reconciliation in Toronto, enhancing the capacity of the organization to apply an intersectional gender equity lens, and using a results-based accountability framework to remain accountable to the public. Now, I'd like to share that these are overarching strategic objectives and priorities. In the materials that were disseminated to this council advisory body, you will find a detailed spreadsheet that includes the overarching buckets of work, so our priority areas that fall under each heading. And so please feel free to consult that document if you'd like some more details on what this 8-year plan entails. So Pardon me while I try to get the screen to move. Okay, here. Next steps. Perfect. So just in terms of next steps, for your information, we will be presenting the gender equity strategy to the final meeting of City Council in July of this year, which is why at this time, we really do welcome any feedback and comments that you might have on our progress so far and the buckets of work that have been identified. When we go to City Council in July, we will make a request to report back to the new term of council in the first quarter of 2023 with detailed activities, outcomes, and an implementation plan that will be created in conjunction with our divisional partners and most certainly continually informed by community perspectives. We don't expect this to be a one and done deal, but that we want to thoughtfully and meaningfully incorporate feedback from the community as we go on into the next 4 years with our first implementation plan. And so I will invite at this point any questions. Please feel free to look at the materials. You have both these slides and the spreadsheet attached. So I will stop sharing. And through the chair, please feel free if you have any comments or questions.
Miigwech, thank you. So I'll make a list for questions. I see Leslie. Okay, so Leslie, you can start us off.
Great. Thank you, Cara, for that presentation. It's good to see things are moving forward. So I have a very specific question, and it has to do with consulting 2S LGBTQI folks, such as ourselves here today. So we've become really good at putting the 2S at the beginning of the acronym. So I have a two-part question. How were Two-Spirit folks consulted and involved in this study? That's the first part. And the second part, generally, how were the rest of us, LGBTQI folks, consulted?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question through the chair. So actually, I would say we had some really wonderful moments of learning with regard to both the Two-Spirited people and Indigenous women. So after consultation with our Indigenous partners, we learned and agreed to proceed in the following way, that we would not have a generic consultation process for Two-Spirited and Indigenous women. Rather, as staff, we will take the time this year to continue to collaborate with our Indigenous partners and co-create a specifically Indigenous-led consultation process in 2023 for Two-Spirited and Indigenous women. So this is actually going to be explicitly stated in the staff report and the gender equity strategy report. With regard to your second question about how they, putting aside the 2S, so LGBTQI plus residents were consulted, through our partner, Social Planning Toronto, we tried to capture as wide a breadth of this population as possible through community organizations that serve these populations as well as community leaders. Now, because of the effects of the pandemic, I have to admit it was quite a challenging process. I think that people were perhaps a bit exhausted and overwhelmed because of the effects of the pandemic. And we did not get as many participants as we would have otherwise liked. So this is the reason why we explicitly make a commitment to continuing to consult with this population and these residents, I should say, across the spectrum.
And I'll recognize there's a follow-up question from Leslie.
Yes, thank you, Cara. That answered my questions. So moving to the follow-up is, how will you be consulting more specifically with the LGBTQI populations? Because there are many communities. There isn't one general queer community. And because I'm on the board and so is Jad of Pride Toronto, and we would be a good conduit for you in terms of participation. And you have all kinds of us sitting here who have major connections in our many communities. So like, we're at the table, use us. So that's one thing. And my other piece was, one of your objectives was to improve homelessness and housing pathways. We have seen on the news that the city of Toronto is now hiring private security to prevent encampments in the parks. So to me, this goes against what you are trying to do here. When I heard the news, and it's caused a huge uproar in the city about this, hiring private security. So I know I'm putting you on the spot by asking you this question, but it has to be asked. How can we say on the one hand we're improving homelessness and housing pathways, and on the other hand we have so many people living in encampments, many of whom are Two-Spirit and Indigenous folks, and many of whom are queer, LGBTQ, trans, folks living in these encampments. So what is the city going to do? And hiring private security is not the answer. Thank you.
Through the chair, with regard to the first question, I absolutely welcome any help from committee members to help to, that would enable us, I should say, to reach out to as wide a breadth of residents as possible. Absolutely, acknowledging that not all people identify in the same way. And as we're moving out of the pandemic, I really would welcome feedback and advice on, how residents are feeling and what would be the most appropriate, sensitive and effective ways to consult with these residents. So I welcome the opportunity for collaboration with your organizations to help push that forward as we go on. With regard to the second question about the category of improving homelessness and housing pathways, as gender equity unit staff, unfortunately, that particular action is not within my jurisdiction to comment on, but I can say that as a gender equity unit and for the gender equity strategy, we will be working with the Housing Secretariat and Shelter Support and Housing Administration on these very issues. Now, clearly, as a gender equity unit, we're focused on women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ plus residents. Member, you're absolutely right. These tend to be a great deal of the homeless population, and we will absolutely be trying to work with both the Housing TO Action Plan and the service plans in SSHA to try to alleviate these challenges for Toronto. I certainly welcome any feedback on our approaches as we go along.
Thank you.
Miigwech, and I believe I saw another question from Ranjith.
Yes, thank you, Laura. My name is Ranjit Kulatilaka, gender pronouns he or they. And Kara, thank you so much for your presentation. Succinct and clear, a lot of work to be done. And I want to validate Leslie's questions and comments. At the last meeting, when Mayor Tory was present, I stressed that criminalization of poverty is not the way forward. And this is what has been happening. while during COVID pandemic, the top 0.001% accumulated a mass amount of wealth, whereas the poor and the working middle class people became much poorer and poorer and poorer. So criminalization of poverty is not the way forward, and I want to stress it again and again. So why not spending the money that is spent on hiring private security for housing, to uplift people's lives who are trying to make ends meet? That's not the way forward for a city that claims to be the sanctuary city and the most vibrant multicultural city of Canada, if not the world, as BBC once proclaimed. So, and you highlighted 8-year plan. So I am also stressing the need to include LGBTQ plus newcomer and refugee people in this plan and consult them in order to identify their priorities. Because I work with LGBTQ plus newcomer and refugee people for whom housing has been a massive, massive crisis, especially if you are trans, gender non-binary identified, and newcomer factors coming in. Other social or political determinants of health comes into play. They are at a huge disadvantage, and these are lives. I'm stressing this because most probably Toronto accumulates. Toronto has the highest number of LGBTQ plus refugees and newcomers. We need to be proactive as well. Now the borders are generally being opened, and there'll be a huge influx of people fleeing to Canada and ending up in Toronto, whereas the funding for housing and everything else, social works, social services are not increasing, are not being increased in proportionately. So these are the factors that needs to be highlighted when we talk about equity. This is working equity that I want to highlight. So please do consult with us. There are so many agencies from the 519. I also want to highlight the African Center for Refugees, an upcoming agency organized by LGBTQ plus refugees and for LGBTQ plus refugees. So that's an upcoming agency, and I work at the neighborhood group community services. I coordinate the Rainbow Connect program. We have a massive program for LGBTQ plus refugees and newcomers. Please do come to us, and we are here to work together. Thank you so much.
Through the chair, I'll just thank the member very much for the offer of support. We will definitely follow up on it. And as city staff, I have noted your request explicitly to pay more detailed attention and give more analytical thought to LGBTQ plus refugees and newcomers as we go forward to make a detailed implementation plan in Q3 and Q4 of this year. I will be sure to include it.
Miigwech. Jad.
Yes, thank you everyone for this chance to speak. So I really want to support, I do believe it was Ranjith and Leslie in their voices. Also want to say, to add to what Ranjith was speaking about, it's important to identify certain subcultures and subgroups to understand their intersectional experiences, including folks from the Swana region, which is Southwest Asian and North African, including a lot of queer Arab, queer Arabs, queer Muslims, a lot of North Africans, a lot of newcomers are from those specific cultures, including myself. And a lot of folks from these cultures are mixing Abrahamic religions and notions of faith with notions of culture, with notions of intersectionality. And many of those folks are also trans and non-binary. So I'm gonna be very honest with you, we really don't have any form of support for people like us. And the support is so minimal. I do believe I've shared my voice so many times over here. And in in the name of full transparency, the comment that Leslie made about reaching out for us for our skills and really having members of the advisory board be able to be part of more open, transparent communications, more open, free-speaking consultations, and really speak about issues that are facing us, and also be able to merge and build these interpersonal relationships with the city and amongst each other was also something that was missed out in this past period. And I think that is one of the reasons why really I personally feel like our skills weren't really utilized. They weren't really, they didn't really benefit the community as much as they should. Again, I am here, as Leslie is, as all members here are, to support you in any type of endeavor, and thank you for this chance to speak.
So through the chair, thank you so much for that. And I'll certainly take that as a lesson moving forward as well. For us as a gender equity unit, we will certainly, well, first, let me backtrack and say the door is always open. Please don't ever feel that we don't want to hear from you. We do actually always want to hear from you. So please do give your feedback and guidance and comments whenever you feel appropriate. I will certainly take your comments moving forward. And I know that there is a lot for us to learn as well. Let me publicly acknowledge that. So for example, some of the backgrounds that you mentioned and learning about, you know, the different very complex intersecting identities that people have. We don't always have all of the information, so we are quite happy to draw on the expertise of these members, your members moving forward.
Miigwech, and I believe I saw Susan's hand next, so I will go to them.
Testing, testing. Here I am. I'm hybrid, live in person, first time back at City Hall and for more than 2 years. So I'm got a new skill set to learn here with hybrid. I missed the presentation and I couldn't find it. I should be looking into the camera perhaps. I don't know where to look. On my computer. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for your direction. Let me try to look into the camera. I've got two views here. So I missed part of the presentation, but I just really wanted to sort of support the previous comments from members about gaps in service, thinking coming out of a pandemic that it's really important. I'm just pausing because there's some other voices in. Okay, we're figuring out technology 1 minute at a time here. Okay, we're just trying to figure out how to do a live presentation here in the room, so my apologies. Just echoing all the comments on the gaps. It's been an incredibly difficult couple years, I think, for everyone, and especially for people on a gender equity lens or members of 2S LGBT communities. I appreciate the presentation and just want to, again, add an emphasis to the non-binary component of gender equity lens and how important that is, and so glad to see that the city has a framework for this and that previous councillor has really pushed this forward. Sorry to say previous, but we have thanked Wong Tam earlier. And just moving forward, I think there's a great deal of energy here for us to continue to give you feedback on how this works every day in our communities. And I would invite the speaker to the presentation to come back in the new term to figure out how we can all come out of this stronger and more resilient than ever before. Thank you for thank you for listening.
Through the chair, I'd like to thank the member for their comments and also to reemphasize for all the comments, including the previous one, that nothing you've seen today is set in stone. And so we are hoping to partner with you moving forward to incorporate, knowledge. There may be knowledge gaps among city staff, as well as issues that evolve as we go along, moving out of this very difficult and complex pandemic. So just to reiterate my commitment to collaboration, learning, and I will actually come back to you before 2023 because it would be good to have your feedback on our implementation plan.
Miigwech. Leslie, you have your hand up.
Hi, thanks, Cara, and thanks, Susan and Jad and Ranjith. So one of the things I had asked at the very first meeting was for all of our emails to be shared with everybody on the committee, because on all the other kinds of community committees I sit on, that is something that happens automatically because that's how community work is done. Community activism work is done by us sharing our voices together and then giving them to you, providing you with support and solutions at the City of Toronto. And I was told in order for the sharing of emails to happen, everybody on this committee would have to give permission. So to get back to what Jad was saying and to let Cara know that you get a better base of support when we can consult with each other about these presentations outside of a quarterly meeting, because then we can rally our folks, we can help you to build better communication pathways and to set up focus groups. So I am suggesting again to the City of Toronto folks, you can ask us in an email, is it okay to share everybody's emails who are sitting on this community advisory board? And I can say personally, yes, you can have my email. And moving forward, Cara, I'm glad to hear that you are still open to hearing our voices as the study and this project moves forward. Thanks for that.
Through the chair, I'll give my thanks and I will defer to the chair to respond to the email issue.
Miigwech, Leslie. I've taken note and I will be following up with the city staff about getting our permissions to send out our email addresses to both this committee and folks who present to us as well. I also want to note that Barca, you had your hand up, so go ahead.
Hey, Cara. I want to first off just publicly say that I know your committee has done a ton of work to try to reach out. Your comments about pandemic-related stuff is real. At Kara's office and Kara directly have reached out to me. I think this also speaks to just capacity when it comes to this work. I'm hearing a lot of comments from this committee about the underutilization of this committee, which I totally second. And I think as we think about a new council being formed in this next iteration, it is something, because clearly there's a lot of great insight just on this table to come together and give you space that's not in this meeting, which this is a different form of a meeting than what a insight meeting could look like. Also, I recognize that your undertaking is huge, a gender equity strategy for basically everyone except for straight men, I think. That's the definition of this strategy, and of course it speaks closely to all of us. So I recognize that this undertaking is immense, and of course there's a close connection for all of us, because as we see all of these other presentations, and of course we care about all of them, unfortunately the way systems of privilege play, I know that the gender equity strategy is where I imagine change will really move, unfortunately. And it's been nice to be part of this committee process, CAP process, to see other places also think about the lens. And so I also recognize that it's a huge undertaking, and I know your office only started, I think, recently too. It's not been around. So naming those pieces, I will say, what can it look like to do the CAB utilization, and also organizational utilization. Our organizations, I represent LGBT youth, and we're provincial. So we get asked for studies all the time, and we have no dedicated resources to actually support this work. So it is always one of those things where it's of course I want to support it because I know Toronto's gender equity strategy or work that happens in Toronto actually moves things. And also, organizations like mine get a dozen emails a month for studies that are supposed to change the lives of our people. So this is not to undermine your work, but I think it's a larger structural piece at the city and how to consider how meaningful partnership happens, whether it's happening through like funded sources, through the Community Service Partnerships Office, other spaces. Because it's great that there's a couple of Pride Toronto board members here, but does Pride actually have capacity to do this in the next 3 months? Probably not. So it's just, what does it look like to build these partnerships in a meaningful way that are ongoing? And I know this is not just all on you, it's a system piece. So I wanted to name that. And I did want to name that it would be great if the strategy had something specifically set aside in building pieces around trans and non-binary populations. Because the gender equity strategy is great, and the like prioritization of women and girls is great, but we've seen actually a lot of work around gender equity strategies around cis women for years, and every government system seems to have those. But trans people become an add-on, and non-binary people even more an add-on. And we know that when it comes to access to services and supports, we still live in a city where the minute a person is identified as trans anywhere in the city, they're told to go to the 519. And so, like, that's not your burden to hold, but it is the reality of people in this community. And same thing with newcomer refugees, is that, like, LGBT communities of, like, second generation folks, I think, have a different, like, piece, and newcomer refugee folks' connection to communities look different, because we know as a frontline service provider, we know we don't reach that many newcomers, because the connection to us LGBTQ spaces is very actually like insulated and separate, unfortunately. It's also a concern. So those are my 2 comments today, and I owe you an email, which is coming, knowing that this work's not done. But yeah, thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, on first a question of building partnerships, I am actually hoping that as the pandemic becomes a little less intense, that it starts to open up avenues for this to happen a bit more easily. I would say, so in answer to your question, the Gender Equity Unit only started in March of 2021, and it was only fully staffed with 2 people in June 2021. So we are quite understaffed, unfortunately, but that's something we're hoping to change moving forward as well. I'd also like to make note and fully acknowledge that we did try to conduct a public consultation process, trying to be very mindful of consultation fatigue as well among some of these residents during a pandemic when people were quite depleted in many ways. And so I actually would like to put my head together with you, quite frankly, to figure out what's the best balance, because I completely hear you about getting requests for, 10 studies a month and not having the capacity to be able to facilitate this, and also having residents be quite tired. But at the same time, we rely on that data to create these implementation plans. And so that leads me to your second question about paying special attention to trans and non-binary residents. That has been noted. And if you have the capacity, and other members of this committee, I certainly would appreciate more guidance on what would be some of the detailed activities that would effectively serve these residents.
Miigwech, thank you. I do not have any further speakers on my list. Oh, I take that back. Ranjith, go ahead.
It's a quick follow-up from Leslie's request. How can we move forward and share our email addresses? Can we take a decision now? Does it require a motion? Oh.
I will follow up with the staff after this to reach out to each person individually to gain that permission. So I will make sure that that is a step that's taken after this meeting. Okay, wonderful. I wanted to emphasize a couple of points just as we close up this speaking and questioning period. I wanted to acknowledge that I heard so much appreciation for the consultation process and that we support it enthusiastically, but also we support even more. Do more, engage us more if you need us, especially the leaders that are currently on this call. And also really want to emphasize that beyond you, in the systems that you are in, that the leaving behind and criminalization of folks from within the 2S LGBT community and those who are even more vulnerable because of their intersectional identities really makes other engagement within the city tokenized. So in order for it to be meaningful engagement and meaningful interventions, there needs to be an addressing of the systems that are criminalizing us at the same time. Because unfortunately, our trust has been broken so many times that part of the reason why consultation is hard is that we don't trust the systems. We don't trust the people in the systems. So it's a bit of a burden to hold. It's not just you, it is the larger system as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll actually give a really quick response to that because I think it's related to the objectives of the Gender Equity Unit itself. We are hoping to build relationships of trust. That's actually extremely important to me as Gender Equity Manager for the city, recognizing the larger systems, but at least starting to do the work of building trust, having an open door, and always, always listening.
Miigwech for your approach. If I have no other speakers, do I have a motion to receive the item? I see Susan, so I have a motion from Susan. All those in favor? Wonderful. All those opposed? Okay. Oh, wait, I saw that. The motion carries. Thank you again, Kara, for being with us. I am going to hold down item QS 6.3 in order to move to item QS 6.4. Two-Spirit, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Advisory Committee report back. And we'll be welcoming in Pam Ryan, Director, Equity and Human Rights, and Vickery Boyles, City Librarian, will provide an update to the committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone. And my pronouns are she and her. So Pam and I are here to report back on the use of spaces that at the library that are made available to the public, and to ensure that our facility booking policies, procedures, guidelines, terms and conditions, and complaint processes are aligned with the city's human rights and anti-harassment policies and its hate activity policies. So next slide, sorry. So the next slide, please. So I can confirm that our facility booking policies, procedures, and guidelines and complaints processes are aligned with and implemented in accordance with the City of Toronto's human rights and anti-harassment and discrimination and hate activity policies. And we've worked with the City Toronto Legal Department to confirm this. Our community and event space policy is also aligned with TPL's obligations under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and is in line with the Canadian Federation of Library Associations' position on third-party use of publicly funded library meeting rooms and facilities. We also have additional obligations as a publicly funded government institution as well. So if TPL offers a service, such as the rental of library space, we're obligated to offer it to everyone within the limits of the law. And we welcome diversity and support equity and inclusion by welcoming everyone without judgment to pursue their interests at the library. Next slide, please. So I just want to go over some of the details. All room rentals for any of our 100 branches are made through one central booking office, which provides consistent and thorough review of requests and application policies. Our room booking procedures were strengthened in 2017 to align with the city's procedures, and this includes language in the rental contract that requires individuals and groups renting our spaces to confirm that they will not conduct any business or activities that are in violation of our community and event space rental policy, the Criminal Code of Canada, including the hate speech laws, or the Ontario Human Rights Code. And the new procedures also provide our staff with more information about the stated purpose behind each room rental application, allowing staff to make better informed decisions about room rental applications and to ensure that room rentals comply with our policies. So I'd like to take a moment just to provide you with some information about how we are supporting the 2S LGBTQ+ community through our spaces, collections, programs, technology, and our staff. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we established a 2S LGBTQ+ focused service area with dedicated service development staff that leads a cross-divisional service committee composed of queer identifying individuals and allies. And this team seeks to reinforce the message that queer and trans rights are human rights. Next slide, please. This team has developed an extensive multi-year service plan that is focused on the goals that all members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community feel welcome and represented in our spaces and by our programs, services, collections, and staff, and that our programs and services help to amplify the voices of the community and foster cross-cultural tolerance and understanding. And in your package, we've included a sheet that provides an overview of our 2021 accomplishments and outcomes and what we're planning moving forward. And here are just a few highlights. Next slide, please. In terms of our programs, and this is just for Pride Month this year, first of all, we develop programs for Pride Month, but I just want you to know that we have Pride programming year-round, and this is an important part of the programming that we provide. But for Pride Month this year, we have a non-binary health and wellness program planned. We have a refugee support program with Rainbow Railroad. We have a queer disability panel, a drag queen story time, and several of them, and Rainbow Story Times for children. And we have 2 LGBTQ+ book clubs for adults and youth. In terms of our collections, we're continuing to build our Pride collection. It is the largest and oldest Pride collection in Canada. It's actually, the Pride collection is located at our Yorkville branch, but I also want to say that we don't just have the those copies of those titles at Yorkville. It's just that we have all of the titles at that branch, but we have the titles throughout all of our 100 branches. We highlight 2 LGBTQ+ authors, and we amplify voices and issues by creating reading lists for all ages, and we showcase our collections in branch and online. I also want to add that for our spaces, we have developed an inclusive washroom policy that will be taken to the library board for approval this year. Next slide, please. For our staff, we have been building staff skills to support the delivery of accessible and informed library services to the 2S LGBTQ+ Torontonians. And with that, we have a mandatory positive spaces training for all our staff delivered in partnership with the 519. We've also introduced, and this was through our collective agreement that was ratified in 2020, a trans affirming care paid leave of 70 hours. And it provides 70 hours of paid time to access physical or psychological trans-affirming care. In addition to that, and it's not on this slide, but in 2021, through our benefit provider, we added $5,000 to people who are staff who are transitioning and need surgical support or surgical enhancement support that isn't covered by OHIP. And so this support is provided through this benefit at up to $5,000 a year. And then we've been working with TPL's, our Pride Alliance staff, which has been a resource group since 2012, to observe and celebrate 2S LGBTQ plus days of significance with library staff. And we also use them as an advisory group and a consultation group to talk to about issues and that are relevant to the 2S LGBTQ plus community. So that's just a highlight of some of the things that we are doing, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that overview. Are there any questions for staff on this item? And I am noting Leslie and Susan. Leslie, you first, please, and then Susan will go to you.
Great. Hi, Vickery. Thank you so much. I am so happy to hear that the library is improved. It's 2S LGBTQI inclusion approaches. In 2018, Buddies and Bad Times Theatre and myself, we were hosting a podcast series, and we approached many different individual library branches. And Oakwood Library, which is my library, was so kind to host us for our podcast series every single Saturday from September to December. And they were so welcoming, so kind, so caring. But on the other hand, we approached 2 library branches in Scarborough, and we were told, sorry, we do not want your kind of people here. And I had a similar kind of response from those same 2 libraries in Scarborough when I was doing a Pride event in 2017 and asked if I could put my posters up. And they said they found our posters were offensive. So when, I'm glad to hear also that the 519 has done training, but what it comes back to is when this kind of training happens, there are always some people who fly under the radar and are homophobic and transphobic. So on the one hand, I'm saying congratulations. I'm very happy with the training and the inclusion. On the other hand, I'm asking, have you put an accountability mechanism in place to hold people responsible for any kind of homophobic and transphobic behaviors?
Absolutely, we have. And first of all, I want to say that what you experienced in not getting your posters posted and the programs considered and accepted is totally unacceptable. And if you ever experience, any of you ever experience, like, I should be contacted, Pam should be contacted, because we will address it immediately. That is totally unacceptable. That is not what the public library is about. And so I just want to start off by saying that. In terms of accountability, we have an anti-harassment, anti-discrimination policy. And through that policy, staff are obliged to follow that policy, and if they don't, they will be disciplined through our human resources processes, and we will speak to the union and work with the union to address the situation with that particular staff member. So, and this is very serious. We don't accept it, and harassment is not tolerated at TPL, or discrimination. So I just want to say that we do have accountability, and we have particular protocols in place to respond to those situations.
Thank you so much.
Miigwech, Susan.
Thank you. Testing. Susan Gapka, she, her pronouns, elle, français. Thank you for your presentation, and I was really excited to see some of the developments since last time we talked. I'm of the mind now, at least today, with a cup of coffee in me at City Hall for the first time in 2 years, time to move forward on some of the issues that brought examination of this report. So thank you for that. I was really, the two things I wanted to comment on was the expansion of a library or content on racialized, Indigenous, and trans and non-binary library. I saw the drag show presentation. I know how incredibly popular they are. As a trans person myself, I'm also interested in expanding that body of knowledge. And so in the 2S LGBTQ library, I don't have the presentation in front of me because I've got other screens open here, but there was like expanding the library, but just to put a somewhat of a emphasis on that particular lens. And the other comment was your trans affirming care package, which I am extraordinarily excited to see and grateful to see. And it's something that we're trying to do in my advocacy outside of this committee to have at other departments across Toronto. So I just really wanted to ask if you could talk a little more about that, but also I have submitted a motion to explore that further. Thank you. I'm under time. I'm proud of myself.
So yes, so in June of 2021, we learned that our benefit provider had a new benefit that was available, and we could opt to make it available to our staff, and we opted to make it available, and we made a decision not to wait for the next round of collective bargaining or whatever, because it was too important to our staff to have this available to them. So it's a standard benefit through our benefit provider, which is Green Shields. And it's through the Extended Health Benefits Plan to support transitioning staff through their gender transition journey. And this includes core surgeries and surgical enhancements. So coverage includes things like reimbursement of core surgeries not covered by provincial OHIP coverage. So it could be vocal surgery, breast construction, facial feminization, and laser hair removal. Surgical enhancement at individual features is also covered, such as nose surgery, liposuction, and eye lifts, and other hair transplant and implants. So it's really extensive and it's detailed in its coverage. And I know after we announced this to the staff and made it available, I got a letter from the co-chairs of our Pride Alliance group thanking us for it, because they recognized how important it was, as we did, to our staff. So yes, we're really pleased to be able to be offering it, and we're also grateful that Green Shields made it available as a benefit, as a standard benefit under our benefits plan.
Miigwech. I'm going to invite the Director of Equity and Human Rights, Yolanda Davidson, to speak.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to quickly address the committee. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Equity and Human Rights here, working with Cara on the gender equity strategy and the equity unit, Janice, who supports this table, as well as many other folks at the city. I just wanted to take a moment to address the rest of the scope of the recommendations that have led to the report back from the Toronto Public Library and the update that Vickery just offered. So a part of those recommendations was also for city facilities to be looking at it, and bodies within the city of Toronto who have oversight of facilities to be looking at processes related to booking, guidelines, management of complaints, and those pieces with respect to how members of the 2S LGBTQI+ community are impacted negatively by booking policies and operations. And so I did want to come back and let folks know that this is not work that has slipped away to the side. It is happening in earnest. There are 4 divisions that were implicated: Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, Economic Development and Culture, Corporate Real Estate Management, and Transportation. And one of the key pieces of these recommendations that's really critical was to not have each division go along creating their own approaches, but to come to an aligned perspective and an aligned operational perspective for the City of Toronto from a facilities lens when it comes to booking, when it comes to understanding and managing complaints, when it comes to procedures to address things like what we have discussed in terms of exclusionary practices. And so that work is underway. A working group has been struck within the city for all 4 divisions to be coming together to do this in an aligned and coordinated way. And we think and feel that it's a good use of your time to have a conversation that's focused on that aligned perspective. And we hope to bring that back to the table in the future at a subsequent meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Miigwech. Do I have any other members wishing to speak or ask questions? Ranjit, yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I have a quick question about the consultations that the City of Toronto Public Libraries have made in arriving at the inclusion policy of 2S LGBTQ plus peoples, specifically about Two-Spirit and Indigenous communities. I am a lifelong learner and trying to be an ally of Indigenous peoples and Two-Spirit people in this land now, which we call Canada. My understanding is that when we are clustering 2S LGBTQ+, we have to also very specifically understand the nuances, the differences between LGBTQ+ communities and the Two-Spirit communities. One factor which as I understand, is for Indigenous Two-Spirit peoples, colonialism has never ended and it is ongoing. So that demarcation needs to be made. So when we cluster them together, similarly, for example, trans people with cisgender people. So those nuances are very, very important to understand. Otherwise, in our trying to do good, we can end up doing more damage. So my question is, have you consulted Indigenous and Two-Spirit communities in your formulation of plans? And I commend the Toronto Public Libraries on the amazing work you're doing. Actually, TPL is a pride of Toronto, if not, and it is an example for the rest of the world. I want to highlight that too.
So I'm going to ask Pam Ryan to speak to this.
Thank you so much for your question. By way of just a bit of background, in 2017, TPL, the TPL board endorsed a series of Indigenous strategies as our response, start of response to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. And as part of that, we were to engage with Indigenous communities from here forward. And in 2017, we did establish a TPL Indigenous Advisory Council, who we meet with on a bi-monthly basis. And it is comprised of different members, community members from different Indigenous communities, as well as individuals who work for Indigenous serving agencies. So we have been meeting for 5 years now, and we do bring to them everything that could potentially be of interest or concern to Indigenous communities, to get their feedback and advice and consult. We do have more work to do in terms of intersectional work across, 2S LGBTQ plus consultations and the Indigenous Advisory Council. So, we are in this for the long haul and we are committed to this journey, but I really do appreciate your pointing that out, and we are completely on the same page in knowing that that's something we need to continue to work on.
Miigwech. I'll emphasize within Indigenous advisory councils to try to prioritize having someone who is 2S on it. It is often something that does not happen. Do we have any other members wishing to speak? Perfect. I see Terrence and I see Councillor Paul Ainsley. We'll go to Terrence first.
Unmute would help. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Awesome. Loving everything that I've seen and that benefits package. I actually made note of that because I'm like, hey, I think my employer is under Green Shield as well. So yes, thank you for everything. The only thing that came to mind, so I've been working in Rexdale and Albion Library has been awesome, been supporting our community vaccine clinic and, you know, has been getting books, putting things on display. I did notice though that there is no like regular Pride colors on display all year round to kind of like signifying that this is a safe space. So it was two actually ideas or thoughts is one, if you could make sure that in all libraries there's always color representation to show the community, but then also speaking to the collections. So those collections and activities are happening across all your branches, not just in particular neighborhoods. And I say activities because I'm like, ooh, the drag queens would be great in Rexdale too, because I mean, I know my community would have a little moments of shock and awe, but I'd like to see that on an ongoing basis to kind of like normalize it and take away that shock and awe, because that's kind of what needs to be done in some neighborhoods in Toronto. So yeah.
Well, thank you for. I think that's a great idea about the Pride colors being on display. I think I'm going to take that back. I think that's a great suggestion, and we do offer drag queen story times throughout the library system. But I've made note of the Albion to make sure we get that story time up there as well.
And Councillor Ainsley.
Yep. Thank you. Not so much the question, just to thank Vickery and Pam for being here today. I've been sitting on the Toronto Public Library Board for a number of years now. I'm sure that Vickery could see my raised eyebrows when the comments were made that posters were not put up in a particular branch. I'm also a city councillor from Scarborough, so you know. Everybody's heard my views on what takes place in Scarborough, what needs to take place. But I'm also very confident when Vickery says she's going to go back and talk to staff and make sure that all of our branches are as welcoming and open as they should be. I have full confidence in her and Pam that that's going to take place. And I just want to thank them for coming here today and describing some of the amazing work being done in our library branches that continue to make it the highest per capita used library system in North America. So thank you very much, Vickery and Pam. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley.
Miigwech. Barca.
Yeah, echoing everyone's comments of commending, I also just want to, because on record, whatever is records. Also, TPL continues to be heavily underfunded in relation to other services in the city, even though they're kind of a central hub for access and for community building. So also just like a call that like when city looks at budgets and keeps moving to recognize that the library system is more than just libraries. It's actually it's an integration system to support marginalized communities in lots of neighborhoods. So just wanting to name that and put that in. And then you might already be doing this, but I had a question of whether you have a centralized system for organizations to be able to send posters, because like I'm part of UFine, which has a provincial, like, so it's like a lot of work for us to have to go to individual systems. And I know in Peel, we can just send them to a central place and they send them to all libraries. So is that the case? And is there a way to make that like some way, or a way to make sure that there's a year-round kind of LGBT section in each library or something like that?
Yeah, we do have a centralized display and distribution process. It's through our communications division. And if you want to email me, I can get you the email address that you can use for that. I don't have it offhand, but I can get that for you. So please feel free to email me directly.
Thank you.
And I'll recognize Leslie.
Thanks, Terrence and Burka. So I just want to address what Burka just said about the need for more funding. Is there a way that we on this committee can put forward a motion to ask for more funding, specifically focused on the improvement of 2S LGBTQI services, and to, as Burka said, and Terrence, to have a visible presence in terms of colors, to have a collection in each library so it's visible. And then, and I don't know if this is, if we missed it on the agenda, the culture initiatives, the current economic development and culture initiatives, have we?
We held that down just for now to move to this item, and then we'll be coming back to it after this item.
Okay, great.
In terms of the motion, can I ask the city staff to reach out to Leslie to help with that?
Thank you.
Great. Okay, Terrence, yes. We cannot hear you currently.
Never mind. Now you got me?
Yes, I do.
Sorry, my bad. I forgot to say this last time, and I have to do this, otherwise the youth in my program will kill me. Shout out. If you're able to, Vickery, did I say your name correctly? Hopefully.
That's correct, absolutely.
This past 2 years, we've had a massive amount of youth come out, especially genderqueer, agender, fluid. Gender is a big focus, but they have been requesting where they could get anime books that speak to the queer and genderqueer community. So anime has become very huge in the youth population. So as you're building up your repertoire of books, I wouldn't say just look at like fictional stories or biography stories or historical, but also looking at anime as a medium for the queer community as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great to know. I'll look into that. I'll speak to the person responsible for our collections, and you know, maybe we could even get a book list together too, so it will help people find those anime books. So that's great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And Burka, go ahead.
I guess just to add to Terrence, I'll just say, Vickery, if you want, like, you can email me. My email's with the city.
Okay.
LGBTQ Fund consistently creates book lists from within our sectors and would be happy to partner on creating some young adults and children's, and I'm sure Terrence can add too, but more than happy to partner on that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Burka.
Wonderful. And I'll emphasize the fact that libraries are remarkable spaces that can be information hubs, they can be community hubs, and they have the potential to be able to grow communities of care. And that is important. And I think that you folks are on the path to understanding what that looks like. Within that, I think it's very important that youth voice just got highlighted. And if they're currently not being consulted, specifically queer Indigenous youth and what they need, and allowing them to speak for themselves and have space to speak around their needs, I would recommend doing that as well.
That's great. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah. If I do not have any further speakers, do I have a motion to receive this item? Great, I see Terrence. So Terrence, I have a motion from Terrence. All those in favor? Great, all those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you again, Vickery, for being here.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
So with that, I will move back in our agenda to the item we held down. So I'm going to open item QS 6.3, the current economic development and culture initiatives with community. And I will welcome Elena Bird, Policy Development Officer, Economic Development and Culture Policy and Research Unit, who will be giving this presentation to the committee. Ms. Bird, I welcome you to the floor.
Good morning, and thank you to the committee and to the co-chairs for inviting me to present today. My name is Elena Bird. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a Policy Development Officer who's leading the work on the cultural districts at the city. Joining me are two colleagues from the Economic Development and Culture Division, Marilyn Nickel, Director of Program Support, and Mariana Mota, Acting Manager of Policy and Research. They are here to listen and help answer any questions you may have after the presentation. Next slide, please. The Economic Development and Culture's 5-year strategy establishes goals and actions to support Toronto's business and culture sectors and ensure that all Torontonians can share the benefits of a vibrant economy and culture. The 4 focus areas of the strategy are equity and inclusion, talent and innovation, space and access, and operational excellence. The City of Toronto has long led efforts to address challenges facing small businesses and the need to make cultural spaces available to local communities. However, two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer spaces continue to be in danger of disappearing. 2S LGBTQ+ communities have historically been marginalized and face significant systemic barriers. Small businesses and cultural spaces are important for the sense of identity, safety, and belonging, and also critical for Toronto's economic and cultural vitality, and for it to continue to be a city where all people feel included and welcome. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an update on 2 key aspects of our work as it relates to the 2S LGBTQ+ communities. They are, 1, enhancing the economic outcomes of 2S LGBTQ+ communities, and 2, working with 2S LGBTQ+ communities to inform the Cultural Districts program. Next slide, please. Through Enterprise Toronto, the city offers a full spectrum of services that entrepreneurs need to launch and grow their business. This includes business training webinars produced by the city and its partners that offer year-round learning opportunities. Due to COVID-19, these are being offered online. Between January 2021 and April 2022, the city delivered over 100 business training webinar sessions that covered 40 distinct topics such as small business tax literacy, legal boot camp, e-commerce 101, and social media for business. Information about participants is collected at the time of webinar registration and collated on a monthly basis. As you can see from the chart, 722 attendees self-identified as 2S LGBTQ+, or more specifically, 405 identified as LGBTQ, 103 identified as trans or non-binary, and 214 identified as two-spirited. All business training webinars are promoted via a newsletter that has 55,000 subscribers, Business TO social channels, Startup Here Toronto platform, and Small Business Centre Ontario network. As part of our 2022-2023 operational plan, EDC will be reaching out to 2S LGBTQ+ communities to encourage increased involvement in these programs via paid and targeted marketing. Next slide, please. The Starter Company Plus program provides an opportunity for eligible participants to get training, advice, mentoring, and to apply for a grant to help start or grow a business. It also offers one-on-one advisory services and mentoring and co-working space with access to computers, internet, and meeting rooms. A total of 18 Starter Company Plus grants at $5,000 were approved for clients who self-identify as 2S LGBTQ+ during the period of April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2022. In 2020, the Canadian Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce received $12,000 toward delivery and administration of the Starter Company Plus via their OUT for business program. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, the city will be partnering with Toronto Public Library locations in 2S LGBTQ areas such as Church Wellesley to directly connect with entrepreneurs and small businesses. Up to 10 starter company grant spots at $5,000 each to the 2S LGBTQ plus communities through the Canadian Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce will be reserved in 2022-2023. Economic Development and Culture plans to work with partner organizations serving 2S LGBTQ plus communities such as the 519 and the Canadian Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce to further engage and promote and support their businesses through business consultations, networking events, and trade shows. Next slide, please. Turning now to the Cultural Districts program. This work is in response to community-based advocacy and efforts to support local culture across several neighborhoods and various council motions. I will highlight those that relate to the 2S LGBTQ plus initiative. In January 2020, former Councillor Wong Tam brought forward a motion asking EDC to develop immediate and long-term recommendations to support the retention and growth of independently owned and operated 2S LGBTQ small businesses and cultural space. Then in November 2021, City Council directed EDC as part of the broad public engagement on cultural districts to continue targeted engagement with equity-deserving groups and to report back through this committee. Most recently, in January 2022, EDC brought forward a staff report with a request for an update on outreach to retain and grow 2S LGBTQ plus small businesses that I have just outlined. It also described a report back on the Cultural Districts program to protect small businesses and cultural spaces in Church Wellesley Village that I will talk about next. Next slide, please. As you know, I met very early on with the 2S LGBTQ plus communities on this topic. There's a lot to share about this slide, so I'm going to spend a bit of time amplifying each bullet point. Back in 2000, in the 6-week window between, in the 6-week window between when former Councillor Wong Tam's first motion was adopted and COVID-19 hit, I held 14 individual interviews and micro meetings with 2S LGBTQ plus businesses and organizations to listen and better understand directly from community what was happening. These were very important conversations about the loss of queer community spaces, the fact that there were no lesbian bars left in the city, the history, community, privilege, and safer spaces in the village, and newer, more recent queer hubs in the city. I continue to listen at community events such as It Takes a Village panel to protect and promote cultural and heritage spaces led by former Councillor Wong Tam's office. Then in the fall, we brought forward a presentation to this committee where I heard key points such as ensuring the program also targets queer women as they are often left behind in initiatives that focus on 2S LGBTQ plus communities, create and protect intersectional spaces, focus on youth consultation and on what 2S LGBTQ plus youth can get out of the program that is not just about nightlife, take an inclusive approach to hear the most marginalized groups that make up the 2S LGBTQ plus acronym, make sure that there is overlap with the night economy strategy, and the scope must include what happens in the village and what happens outside the village. I also learned more last fall through a partnership with former Councillor Wong Tam's office and the University of Toronto's Masters of Urban Innovation Student Research Project, overseen by Dr. Gabrielle Eidelman and Karina Gabrielle. Through the course on local and regional government, the students conducted an environmental scan of 10 cultural districts that complemented the work already undertaken by the city. Key findings from their studies are that, first, multiple city divisions will have to work together if any cultural district designation is going to be properly implemented. For example, many of the world's successful cultural districts included mention of city planning and development, economic and social development policy, tourism improvement plans, and civic renewal programs. Secondly, it will require advocacy beyond the city. Many examples mention the importance of tourism and amending heritage acts. which require provincial involvement. And finally, the environmental scans also offered opportunities to consider how to support cultural businesses that are outside of the cultural district through grants or processes to nominate a business such as an asset of community value, seen in London. In November 2021, EDC hired J. Pitter Placemaking to lead the public consultations for the Cultural Districts program and develop a proposal for the city. Ms. Pitter leads a practice that is recognized within academic and working contexts for acknowledging the connection between all urbanism projects and colonialism. As part of an overall engagement strategy, Jay partnered with Pride Toronto to host a participatory virtual panel on May 10th that included Leslie Lee Cam. Nice to see you, Leslie. At that panel, I heard again that we need to value the work that has been put into creating the village and be mindful that 2S LGBTQ plus people live throughout the city. There's also a need to expand the understanding of what a cultural district means. As important as it is to listen and learn, it's also crucial to see how it turns into action. I will now focus on 3 key areas of what I heard and how it is influencing the design of the Cultural Districts program, specifically looking at space, culture, and equity. Next slide, please. We heard that there is a crisis of closure and absence of safer gathering spaces. 2S LGBTQ communities face disproportionate risk of cultural erasure, co-option, and displacement. For that reason, we understand that culture is boundless. We're connecting all of this work to broader policies around the night economy and creative space, and focusing on the Church Wellesley area while recognizing queer spaces across the city. Next slide, please. As we were doing this work, we heard questions about the term culture. Whose culture? Does culture embrace community? For that reason, we want to emphasize that as part of this work, we're embracing a broad definition of culture that includes everyone and diversity of cultures. We're looking into things like green spaces, civic commons, and mutual care networks, and we'll take action to maintain local culture while welcoming new communities. Next slide, please. Lastly, we heard that we need to address all forms of oppression affecting 2S LGBTQ plus communities. For that reason, the Cultural Districts program will put equitable placemaking into practice, center the local knowledge and expertise of everyday people, and define success on the reduction of barriers and improved economic, social, and cultural outcomes. Next slide, please. Cultural districts take time to emerge and develop. It's a process tethered to arrival, establishment of small businesses, artistic expression, mutual aid, and community care. Culture should not be managed through a top-down approach. People on the ground are the ones who maintain, create, and nurture culture every day. The key principles of the Cultural Districts program proposal are co-creation, co-stewardship, and co-learning. The co-stewardship model positions the City of Toronto as a key program administrator and champion for the program, while recognizing the important roles and expertise of other co-stewards such as not-for-profit organizations, philanthropic leaders, corporations, and grassroots groups. As you can see, the program is being co-created in real time by meeting with everyday people who live across the city, as well as people who work in land use planning and cultural contexts, and in particular the 2S LGBTQ plus community. This approach honors the people who have invested their lifeblood into these communities. So as these communities have increased in value, that they get to stay in their communities to benefit from the value that they have actually sowed into those neighborhoods, along with people from other cultures as well. It's about community strength, community power, and community magic that will result in better community outcomes and benefits for everyone. Next slide, please. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I will ask the members if they have any questions for staff. And Leslie, I see your hand is up.
I seem to be asking a lot of questions today. Thank you, Elena, for the presentation. And yeah, so I was part of the last, I guess, a small focus group with Pride Toronto that was led by Jay Pitter. And I just reiterated what I had said previously when we had this presentation at this committee level a couple of meetings ago. And I want to tie it into what something Terrence said earlier about having a presence across the city, you know, in terms of the libraries. So queer folks live everywhere in the GTA, but we only see the rainbow crosswalks at Church and Wellesley or in that neighborhood. I have personally approached my city councillor, Josh Matlow, and I have asked because I am getting lesbophobic remarks from my neighbors because I have my rainbow flag flying. I live at Bathurst and St. Clair neighborhood. There are lots of queer folks living in this neighborhood, like we live everywhere. And I asked Josh Matlow, can you help me to get a rainbow crosswalk in my neighborhood? And he said to me, no, because our queer cultural district is Church and Wellesley. But we know from what Elena has just said and what Jay Pitter found out is that's not true. And the reason I'm linking it back to what Terrence said is Rexdale also has a huge queer population. There are pockets where we live, but we live everywhere. And to let people know that we live everywhere, we need these crosswalks everywhere in the city. So I am putting that out there for you, Elena. I said the same thing to Jay Pitter. So I'm putting that on the table. And it was a great presentation. Thank you. And Elena, when you talked about action, to me, this is an actionable and concrete thing that you can do so people know that we are here, we are queer, and we are human beings just like everybody else in the city. Thank you.
Migoch, thank you. Elena, do you have a response, or is there any other questions from the members? Ranjit, I saw your hand go up. Go ahead.
Yes, and thank you for this great initiative. And I really want to validate what Leslie just said before I start my talk. Yes, we have existed throughout human civilization and we are everywhere. And in urban, rural communities all over the world. It's sometimes US LGBTQ plus people, a lot of the time, are hidden. They don't want to come out. And so coming out is a long and a tedious process. So that does not mean that we do not exist. We do. Is the fact that we have to constantly negotiate our safety, especially if somebody is identified as two-spirit, transgender, non-binary, their bodies attract violence in the cis heteropatriarchal society. So having to navigate that constantly is a massive, massive, massive issue, and their bodies represent their resistance. So this is why it is absolutely important to acknowledge that US LGBTQ plus people are everywhere and they have existed all over, all the time. And especially US trans people have been in the forefront of queer trans liberation movement struggles. So that is in response to actually Leslie's comment. I want to also highlight the fact that LGBTQ plus refugee and newcomer people are here, have been here, and I have been working with them for over 12 years, and the expertise they bring into this country, knowledge, wealth of expertise that they bring into this country need to be harnessed much more systematically. And businesses, government institutions need to acknowledge and validate and create systems to harness their knowledge, because a lot of them, most of them are so readily employable. And some of them have 5, 6, 7, 8 languages that they can speak and work with. So these are the factors that needs to be harnessed, and please reach out to myself or other agencies that are working with to LGBTQ plus newcomers. For more information and support, we can work collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and also as well, Leslie, I hear what you're saying, and I think that one of the things that we're really trying to embrace is this idea that the community creates culture, and the community also creates the cultural district program. Like, this kind of co-creation process is something that we fundamentally believe in, and we're also trying to be flexible and offer a program that responds to the community's direction on what that means. So when we're talking about culture being boundless, that's where I think about your idea, Leslie, of crosswalks, rainbow flags and crosswalks all over the city. And so kind of connecting that into the cultural district and making sure that that's part of how we're thinking about it, as part of its DNA, I think is really, really important. And as well, thank you, Ranjit, for your comments too. I think that this is why we wanted to make sure that we come back to this committee and make sure that we're engaging over and over again, and through a kind of a partnership through this process to make sure that this program really reflects the diversities and the kind of opportunities that the 2S LGBTQ plus community offers the city.
Miigwech. Jad.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, again, this is, I just want to make sure that everything that I say comes with the intention of healing and being constructive, and, you know, yeah. So this is a current economic development and cultural initiative within the community. So in my mind, it is meant to cause the economic developments of queer businesses and also the increase of cultural initiatives within the community. This is what I see the vision of the title. So first, let me start off by saying that there are a lot of cultural initiatives being created with the community. So many grassroots cultural initiatives that are being created with the community. And many, like myself, have been working for years and years, and these initiatives are unwitnessed and unseen. And moreover, in terms of the economic development part specifically, many of these initiatives were created by very marginalized people themselves. And looking around, 90% of these initiatives were educational, cultural, and community projects from marginalized people to help their own marginalized communities. Now, the issue, for example, is many of these founders are stuck, and many of the development of these initiatives are stuck. For one of the smallest issues, for example, is many of the founders and the creators cannot afford grant writers. That is, I would say, part of the major economic development plan. And only with those grant writers can you get the grant. And this is, again, why so many grassroots initiatives are created, especially during the pandemic. Marginalized Majority serviced 5,500 people, but they went under the radar as old-standing queer institutions that might have a history with anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, kept getting grants over and over again, while not really making the systemic or structural positive changes to the lives of the community members. So my question is, are there any specific foundational skills or support that can really help folks create initiatives in the village or outside of it, and also support marginalized founders and community initiative creators and cultural initiative creators in building up their own skills and their grant writing? And also the village, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, the village is not very safe for queer people. So not only is it one of the very few queer spaces for queer people over here, it's really not that safe. And most of the businesses in the village are white owned, not BIPOC owned, not SWANA owned, and act accordingly. This is why a young Syrian immigrant was beat up in the middle of the village last year. I'm sorry about this, but that is a fact. So it's not just important to create a queer culture, but an intersectional and diverse queer culture with the intention of doing that, and also with the intention of understanding which other institutions have been seeked out as symbols of that queer culture for the past years, and how can we give space for newness? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. There's a lot in there. In terms of, well, I'll just try to answer a few pieces. Fortunately, my colleague Cara is taking notes, and so we're going to take all this information back and reflect on it, and I'd also be happy to reach out to you to hear more. In terms of the partnerships of cultural district programs, that's one of the things that you talked about first. Right now, it's being led out of economic development and culture, but we're very much aligned with our city planning colleagues and social development, finance, and administration, particularly the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, to do this work as well. We have connections into affordable housing, into the Housing Secretariat office, and parks, forestry, and recreation, and transportation. So in many ways, this is a very comprehensive look at equitable placemaking. But because of the term culture, and because part of the reason why this is sort of come about is this idea of like the community's intangible cultural heritage, and how do we support the community's intangible cultural heritage, which is why EDC is leading this work. I hear what you're saying about the burden of applying for grants, and we need to access that and provide support as part of that process as much as possible. And also hear what you're saying about the village and the privilege and kind of issues around safety and intersectionality in the village. It's actually something that I've been hearing right from the get-go. So it's really sort of trying to understand how we can honor the history. I know that it's also a place of arrival. It's a really important space, but how do we make it better? How do we make it open to everyone? And while recognizing the really important history and space that was created there, but also recognizing that to us LGBTQ communities live across the city. And I think that's something that I'm hearing loud and clear, and that's also part of making the city safer. Thanks.
I'll do one more ask for any questions or speakers. Okay. I wanted to finish with an emphasis that if it has not yet been done, to review your grant matrices and processes with a decolonial and anti-oppressive lens, and to make sure that includes alternative application methodologies, for instance, using verbal application methods for communities that provides further accessibility to. And also training whoever is doing the review of grants to understand that things like perfect grammar and well-structured sentences is not the content of the grant, it is just the performance of it, and that they need to see past that. So would highly recommend that as well. With that, I will ask if, do I have anyone can I have someone to move this motion? Motion to receive the item. Those are the words I was looking for, everyone. Thank you. Do I have a motion to receive this item? Wonderful. I see Jad. So I have a motion from Jad. All those in favor? Perfect. All those opposed? Great. So the motion carries. Thank you again so much, Elena, for being with us today and for speaking and for the work that you are doing.
Thank you to the committee.
I am very excited about the next two items because they're member designed items. So I will go next to item QS 6.5, feasibility of establishing a City of Toronto unit responsible for 2S LGBTQ issues. And Lori, I'm going to invite you to speak to the item.
Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you, Co-Chair, for your excellent work today, and to all of you for time on the agenda. So I'm speaking today actually on behalf of Laura and myself, but given Laura's role, I offered to do this speaking. And this is, I want to thank also Janice and Sylvia for their help in preparing this. So you can see in the meeting materials the letter that Laura and I submitted for this item, but I will just talk you through that. So essentially, what we're suggesting is that it be investigated that the City of Toronto have a unit responsible for 2S LGBTQ+ issues. And so this follows really from some of the conversation we've had today about what it is actually possible for our advisory committee to accomplish with our quarterly meetings and what might be a better way to have a more sustained presence of 2S LGBTQ issues within the city. So as we've heard as a committee, many of the equity deserving groups do have a dedicated unit or office with the city. So for example, the Indigenous Affairs Office, the Gender Equity Unit, and the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit as a few of them. But this does appear to be lacking with respect to our communities. So we feel that dedicated staff support is necessary. First, to enable follow through on the recommendations that our committee makes. Secondly, to ensure that individual 2S LGBTQ+ identified city employees aren't informally called upon to do the work of representing our communities. Third, to allow for collaboration with other equity units and offices for an intersectional approach to the issues that impact our communities. And finally, to support the sustainability of 2S LGBTQ+ related initiatives, for example, through changes in government. So in response, we are proposing that our committee adopt the following recommendation: that City Council request the City Manager to investigate the feasibility of having a dedicated City of Toronto unit responsible for 2S LGBTQ+ issues, and to report their findings back to either this advisory committee or to the Executive Committee as appropriate by Q2 of 2023. Just to add some context there, the reason it's either our committee or the Executive Committee is because as the term of our committee is ending and there may be a change in government, we have to wait to see that this committee is re-struck, essentially. So in case that doesn't happen, the Executive Committee would be the second place where that report would go. I think that's all I have to say. I'm happy to try to answer questions if there are any or hear comments from the members.
Miigwech, for this, I'll also ask if you are okay being the mover for this motion as well.
Yes, I'm happy to be the mover.
Great. Are there any questions within the committee? Leslie.
Well, I was waiting for somebody else to say so.
Oh, and I think we have you.
I did. Oh. I'm moving. Can you see me?
You're moving now. Perfect. Okay. You're back.
Thank you, both of you, Lori and Laura, for coming up with this motion. It's a brilliant idea, as Lori pointed out, the government is about to change in the province, and not mentioning any names. If a certain party gets back in, we don't know where we will stand in terms of, any kind of focus on queer issues. So it's really important to move this forward so we have a presence, at least at the City of Toronto level. So I fully support the motion, and thank you so much for coming up with it.
Miigwech, and I believe I also saw Susan's hand.
Testing here. Yeah. I'm having technology fun here. But, oops, just trying to get in the correct view here. So, yeah, thank you for bringing this motion forward and this initiative. Apologies for not being able to move when requested to help out a few months ago. Things have been busy at my end, but speaking in support of this resolution and really inspired by the initiative of the mover, thank you very much. This committee existed in early 2000s, and then it was extinguished in a change in governance. And one by one, I know there was a series of equity committees for different portfolios. And I have noticed in the City of Toronto that now that the committees have been reestablished. We have an Indigenous Affairs office, we have an anti-Black racism office. And so it follows then the precedent would indicate that we'd be more specific in what we're doing here and create the office, which in 2003 was at the wave. I should be careful how I say this, but it felt like as a member of that committee that this committee, there was suddenly there was a decision in the, I don't think it was the mayor's office, I think it was the operating officer's office, that these committees would be discontinued. So this would give our lives and our equity more rigor and be more established, and very much feeling that it was long overdue to reestablish this committee, and hoping that it does continue. So speaking in favor of the initiative, and hoping that this committee is reestablished, as I feel that we've only been here for part of this term, so it took a while to do the terms of reference and figure out how to establish it, then recruit members for the committee. So I feel like we've just begun to fight. We've just there are so many really amazing, and let me use the word pre-pride, fabulous opportunities in front of us, that this work should continue and should be well established in the City of Toronto. Speaking of external jurisdictions, actually, City of Toronto has an opportunity here to be a real beacon of light for other jurisdictions across this province and across this country. And so I think we can continue to set that example, and just really appreciating being here with you all and seeing the diversity on the screen in front of me from all our different communities, trying to do the best to represent the very broad and diverse neighborhoods that we all live in and Zoom in or WebEx from. Thank you so much. Turn that off.
Miigwech, Susan. And I think that you touched on a lot of really important pieces. This is really an important endeavor in order to create that consistency that isn't caught by start and stopping that happens when this committee starts and stops with elections. So I do think this is important. Now, I know that the city has a motion ready for us to review as well. And we have Lori as the mover. So if they could display that, that'd be great. Okay. Hopefully folks got a moment there to review it. I'm going to call for a vote of those in favor. Wonderful. I think that was everyone, so I'll say all those opposed, but okay, the motion carries. Thank you so much, everyone. And an additional thank you to Lori. I will just keep saying it, for bringing this forward, but also for being a voice and presenting it to us as well. We'll move on to item QS 6.6, also a member motion. Leading and Learning with Pride, a toolkit to support 2S LGBTQI+ seniors, formerly known as Diversity Our Strength. And I will call for Leslie to speak to this item.
Thank you, Laura. I want to say, first of all, thank you to the city staff. This was actually Janice's idea for me to come up with a motion regarding this particular item. Thank you to Sylvia, Jonathan, and Nancy. So I guess everybody got my information that I put out in anticipation of me speaking here today. So what's been happening is that we all know that with COVID, over 4,000 seniors died in long-term care homes across the province. How many of those were queer seniors, 2S LGBTQI seniors? The conservative statistic is 1 in 10 folks, 2S LGBTQI. And when you think about what's happening in long-term care homes, seniors were heavily impacted by the COVID pandemic. And it was even harder on 2S LGBTQI seniors because essential caregivers were not recognized in our chosen family situation. As a result, we had no visitors because for many of us, we don't have biological families. We have been disowned, and many of us do not have children. So we were further isolated, we were invisible, and we were lonely. And the level of neglect was so high that it impacted straight seniors and was even worse for queer seniors. So the other thing that's been happening too is that religion, it's becoming more and more prevalent in long-term care homes, that religion is being used as a weapon against 2S LGBTQI seniors who are residents in these homes. And when I'm talking about long-term care homes, I'm talking specifically about the 10 long-term care homes that are run by the City of Toronto. So many of you know that my work is advocating for queer seniors, but I work from an intergenerational perspective. So for me, it's really important that our lives are better when we end up in one of these institutions. And I do not want to see my queer young friends having to experience what we are experiencing as seniors in these institutions. And I speak from a very personal point of view. In September, actually June and July and August of 2021, I was in a long-term care home because I fell down and broke my ankle. And I was in what's called a transition care program. There was no 2S LGBTQI training for the staff. And I found that out on day one of me ending up in this long-term care home. Luckily, I have a big voice and I can advocate on my own behalf. But many queer seniors do not have that luxury or that privilege. I then ended up in a rehab hospital where I was further misgendered. I did not experience any homophobia or neglect directly, but it was not great. So I'm saying this leading up to the fact that in the city's 10 long-term care homes, starting in 2008, many community organizations got together with the City of Toronto, the Seniors Long-Term Care plan, their department, and we developed a toolkit to train all of the staff in the city's 10 long-term care homes. The toolkit was called Diversity Our Strength. The toolkit was not used in any of the 10 long-term care homes. We found this out in 2017. So between 2008 and 2017, there was no 2S LGBTQI training for the city's 10 long-term care homes, the staff. In 2017, I was the chair of the Senior Pride Network. When I found out that this toolkit had never been implemented, I went to Councillor Josh Matlow. He is the city councillor responsible for seniors issues. And I said to him, you are doing a disservice. Nothing is being done. He had not even heard of the toolkit. So I just want to point out, for all of us sitting on at this table, when we talk about not being seen, generally, 2S LGBTQ seniors are invisible. We're not even on the radar. So for the city councillor who is responsible for advocating on behalf of seniors to not even know that this toolkit existed was very disappointing, and I have to say it made me very angry. But to his credit, he got on board immediately. We refreshed the toolkit. We had input from Sherborne Health, from the 519, from the Senior Pride Network, and from Rainbow Health and the city staff. So we, again, 2017, we put the toolkit back out, and come to find out in 2022, again, the toolkit was not implemented. The reason why this is now on the table is because I personally have become aware of 2 situations involving 2 older gay men in one of the city's 10 long-term care homes who were experiencing homophobic remarks on a regular basis and physical neglect and abuse based on religious beliefs by staff. I currently sit on the city's working group. Coincidentally, I'm on the city's working group to revitalize the same toolkit, which is now coming in under a different name, Leading and Learning with Pride. It's, again, a training toolkit, the same one that was never used. So when I found out about these specific situations in one of the city's 10 long-term care homes, and on, parallel to us revitalizing the toolkit, it was like, so we have to do something. How many more 2S LGBTQ seniors have to experience homophobia, transphobia, lesbophobia, and physical abuse and neglect simply because of who we are? So this is why I'm bringing this motion forward. In my letter, it outlines the summary and the content of why this is coming forward. So in a nutshell, what's happened now is that the City of Toronto, the long-term care department, along with the 519, applied to New Horizons, and we received a $25,000 grant. That grant is going to be used to train 420 staff. Half of them are city staff in community programs. The other half are management in the city's 10 long-term care homes. My question is to Josh Matlow, because we had a meeting with him, 3 of us who are queer senior community activists. We had a separate meeting with him, and we said to him, if we had not gotten this $25,000, how would the city be moving forward with implementing this brand new toolkit and the training for all of the staff in the city's long-term care homes so queer seniors do not have to suffer any more. There was no answer to that. I then prodded him further to ask him to make a motion, and he said that he would, but we have not heard anything back. We've had a meeting with Jennifer Dockery, who is the manager of the city's long-term care department, and she has said she's committed to getting money, but the budget is closed for 2022. So we are now left with only 420 staff being trained and no concrete commitment moving forward for all of the staff in the city's 10 long-term care homes to receive mandatory training. That's one. A commitment from the city for future funding once the $25,000 runs out. And thirdly, an accountability mechanism, because we now have a history from 2008 until 2022 that this training has never happened. And who is suffering? 2S LGBTQI seniors. So Susan and I are your two seniors sitting on this committee. But as I like to say, one day, if you are lucky, all of you here will be queer seniors. And I want you to have a better life if you happen to end up in a long-term care home than those of us who are now in these long-term care homes as 2S LGBTQI seniors. So I'm pleading my case moving forward. I don't know, this is the point where you put the thing on the screen. I have to tell you, I learned a lot about how to make a motion. And if it hadn't been for the city staff, I don't know where I would be with this today. So thank you so much to the city staff. Can we put up the recommendations for the motion? Or do we have to?
Yes, I'll ask the city to put up the motion, though there will be a space for questions as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone the moment to read on the screen, and if you would like me to read it out loud, let me know.
So basically, it's to make sure it's implemented, to provide the training to all staff and make it mandatory, to develop an accountability mechanism, and to secure the necessary funds for training of all staff moving forward.
Which I'm going to emphasize this one as well. I've heard through my network of queer seniors going back into the closet and separating from their partners because of the lack of safety, which is incredibly sad to hear. And so we should not be having that within Toronto.
And the other, sorry, Laura, I was also going to say, not only are we going back into the closet, as soon as a queer senior couple, if they're brave enough to say they're queer and they're a couple and they're going to a long-term care home, they're separated. Straight couples who are seniors going into long-term care homes, an effort is made to keep them together. The other thing that the general public does not know is that since COVID started, suicide attempts by queer seniors has gone up. And that is so sad for me, but it also makes me really angry, because if the training is happening or had been happening, we would not be in this situation right now.
Yeah. Miigwech, are there any questions from the group? Yes, so Councillor Ainsley, I'll go to you first, and then Susan, I'll come to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm more than happy to support the motion. I think it's needed. It's overdue. I just wanted to know if I can make a friendly amendment or a suggestion that we have something in there that the general manager of long-term care homes report back to this committee by a specific date, like the third quarter of 2023, or report back to the appropriate standing committee at City Council, just so there's a report back mechanism and it doesn't, drop off the table.
Great. I appreciate that, Councillor Ainsley. My head is so wrapped up in just getting the training happening. Yeah. I'm glad you can see more clearly than I. That is a great suggestion, and I am happy to have it added.
I don't know if I can see more clearly than you can, or I'm just used to the bureaucracy at City Hall.
No, I appreciate the amendment.
Yes, Miigwech, for your knowledge there. So if we can make that amendment, that would be appreciated. And Susan, I will turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Chair. Trans senior over here. No, not a senior, sorry. Whoops, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a trans elder, not a senior, but that's like trans elder to you. But I just really want to honor and appreciate and recognize the spirited determination of Leslie Kem, for all the work you've done on these issues, both here at this committee, the City of Toronto, and all the other spaces that I share with you in this little rectangular box. But soon, perhaps, to be more in person at times, and safely, of course. So I just really wanted to recognize we are survivors. And I just also, two things I'm thinking of in supporting it. My support, I can only give you 100% support. Because I'm a little good at math, so I can't give you 110%, but I just want to speak in support with highlighting two things that come to mind. There have been a number of research studies in the City of Toronto and GTA area on the importance of this issue. And so perhaps part of the review could be a bit of an environmental scan of what has happened, because it's unfortunate that at times there's a history. You have the Senior Pride Network. I did a project on this about more than 10 years ago with Rainbow Health Ontario at Sherbourne Health Centre and York University. And so I think there's some really important information might be gathered in there. And to find out why, it's kind of like going to an inquest on certain authority violence. It's like the recommendations are all there. They just, why haven't they been implemented yet, or implemented the way with an evaluation and review? The second piece I wanted to highlight or bring attention to was the T again, the trans in long-term care. The studies have gone back to when I first started doing advocacy years ago, well, more than 2 decades ago, and how the horrifying experience of someone not being treated in their lived and authentic identity when they're not able to defend for themselves. I worry about this in a lot of healthcare. We've made tremendous improvements in human rights and advocacy and protections for people, but I still wanted to uncover the binary facilities or approach for long-term care, and how really wanted to shine an extra light on some of the issues of trans and non-binary people, how both in administration of how documentation is collected and reported, but also in ensuring that trans and non-binary people, and I'm just going to look around, and of course not just exclusively to us white folks here, but racialized and Indigenous people as well, that all of that, just add those extra layers of intersectionality onto that. So thank you for listening, and I'll pass it back to the chair for now.
Miigwech, Susan. Leslie.
I'd like to respond to Susan, what you just said about trans seniors in long-term care homes. That is actually another situation that's very saddening and disappointing, because we are finding out in several of these homes that trans seniors who have POAs that say, if I get to a point in, my cognition that I don't remember being who I actually am right now, I want you to continue to recognize me as the gender that I am when I entered the long-term care home. And the POAs are not being recognized, and families are coming in and creating havoc with the lives of trans seniors. So that's a huge piece also that we are dealing with in these 10 long-term care homes. So I'm more than happy, Susan, to work with you in anything you would like to add to the motion on that respect. I support you fully.
Miigwech, and I'll recognize Lori.
Thank you, Leslie, for bringing forward this important issue. Happy to support this motion. I just want to ask you about the training itself. I know in a lot of training materials that are developed related to our communities, sometimes the B gets missed. And so I just want to check in with you to make sure that the training that you're recommending does include the B, and also I think the I and the A are also really important and often not included in these trainings. So I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the training itself.
Yes, that's a great point you've raised, Lori. So we are trying our best in terms of inclusive training and culturally competent training. We are working with the 519. So in many instances, the 519 takes the lead when they do training. In this situation, we have said from the working group that community educators, so those of us with lived experience across the acronym, will be working and giving direction to the 519 in terms of how the training and all the different components, and recognizing all of our many identities, not only our specific identities, but the different intersecting points of race, class, and gender. I hope that answers your question and your concerns.
Yes, thanks, Leslie. That's great to hear.
Wonderful. And the city has worked in the background to amend the motion, so I'm going to ask them to put that on the screen for us. And it is number 2 there that has been amended.
Councillor Ainsley says perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so Leslie, I'm going to ask you first, since this has been brought forward by you. Are you okay with being the mover for this item?
Yes, I am. So
Great.
Moved.
So I have a motion from Leslie. All those in favor? Great, and that was everyone, so the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Leslie, for bringing that forward and being brave enough to speak to your personal experience as well. We have received 2 separate motions on item QS 6.4 to reconsider this item and these motions. I'm going to ask for a vote of the members to reconsider. So those in favor of reopening it. Let me see a show of hands. Okay, is there anyone opposed? Okay, so we have 2 motions here. So the first we'll put up, I believe, is by Susan. And if I can ask the staff to put those motions up, or that motion up, and Susan, if you mind speaking to it. Do not currently see you, so if it's not a good time, I will jump to the next one.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Technical problems, but I just want to see the motion on the screen if possible. I'm having a bit of a technical glitch here, but we'll figure it all out by the end of the meeting. Thank you. I'm just going to, we request well, you can see the motion there. And I just really felt that it was so incredibly important for the trans affirming care package that the Toronto Public Library brought in, be available to other trans and non-binary and transitioning employees, staff. I don't know if I think it would have to be staff. Not volunteers, but that be developed or explore opportunities for across the city of Toronto. It's something that I'm really think is really important to include trans and non-binary people in the culture and the economic structure of the city of Toronto. So I think it's fairly self-evident, and I will stop there because of time and I'll be open to any questions.
Wonderful. I will ask for the second motion to be shown, and then I'll go to questions if that is okay. And I believe the second motion was put forward by Leslie. So, Leslie, do you mind speaking to your motion?
So when we were having the discussion and based on what Terence and Ranjit were saying, I asked for this motion to increase the funding for the collections and a rainbow presence in every library in the Toronto Public Library system. Because we know that the library system is underfunded, as Burka pointed out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Before I go to a vote, are there any questions? Okay, we'll vote on the first item brought forward by Susan first around trans affirming care. And Susan, is it okay to consider you the mover for this item?
Absolutely, and I'm voting in favor until I get my my computer up and running again.
Great. So all of those in favor of that amendment? Okay, and that was everyone. So the motion carries. We'll move on to the second piece about increasing funding and a rainbow presence in every library, brought forward by Leslie. Leslie, is it okay to consider you the mover for this item?
Yes.
Great. So all those in favor of the motion amendment? Wonderful. So that was everyone. So the motion carries. Thank you to both members for submitting those and working with the staff to pull it together. That brings us to our last item. So item QS 6.7, Two-Spirit Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Advisory Committee Retrospective and Member Feedback. I can't believe how quickly the time has passed and that we're at this point already. So I will invite Janice, I believe you're speaking to this, to come off mute and to talk to the committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to quickly circle back with folks to first of all thank you for your service this term, but also to do a little bit of a reflection in terms of our last 6 meetings, what we've done, and then seeking some general feedback from the committee in terms of future committees and how we can better serve members. So I'm going to quickly share my screen just to do kind of an overview of the presentations we've received and the participation of the committee, and then we can jump into a couple questions for feedback. So I hope everyone can see my screen okay. So our first meeting, as if you remember, was on March 26, 2021, and this was largely an orientation and onboarding session where we received some presentations from the city manager's office, from clerks, just to orient our members in terms of the roles, responsibilities, and procedures of the committee. Our second meeting was on June 22nd, where we also heard about, once again, cultural spaces, specifically looking at the village, as well as, so two of the items that we heard report backs from today, as well as policies governing safe spaces, including the library and other city facilities. And then we started to develop our work plan at that meeting as well. On September 22nd, we finalized the work plan development, and we heard from some of those priority areas, including poverty reduction, safe and affordable and supportive housing, shelters, as well as the digital infrastructure plan. At our December meeting, we then had an overview from our protocol office on the queer recognition work plan, as well as a service youth plan for transgender and non-binary youth. We also had the drug poisoning crisis presentation from Toronto Public Health. And then we heard from the gender equity strategy, and my office provided an overview of the equity lens tool that the city uses internally. At our February meeting, we heard from the mayor. We got an overview of the budget process, as well as a presentation from SafeTO. And I'm sure I don't need to recap the meeting for you today, since it is in real time. So just sharing that really quickly, a couple questions that I wanted to pose to the committee was, do you find that the content of this meeting, the content of these meetings were meaningful? Do you feel that these meetings were inclusive? Do you feel that you were able to provide strategic advice to the city to support 2S LGBTQ equity and inclusion? What are some strengths and what are some opportunities for improvement? Not that you have to answer each of the individual questions, but just some general guiding questions to seek your feedback. And maybe before we open it up for that discussion, I just want to quickly share that, similar to some of our other meetings, I will also be sending out a survey following the meeting to seek your feedback on this meeting particularly, but also more globally on your experience with the committee and how we can improve that moving forward.
Miigwech, I will, before we go into discussion, I want to just note that it is 12 o'clock. Because we're on our last item, I'm going to ask that we continue on until we finish, rather than taking a lunch break. And with that, I will also note that earlier today, multiple members spoke to the want to be further engaged or more deeply engaged in how this committee is worked with. And so I'll put that on the table as an opportunity for growth as well. Terrence, I think I saw your hand go up, but if folks want to raise their hands for speaking, I will make a list. And awesome. Terrence, go ahead.
So I had two thoughts, and you actually just spoke to the one. So reiterating that continuation in working together and sharing of information to connect with anyone who's interested. That'd be great. But the second bit is in reviewing what's been done over the past year or so. I realize in looking at it from the lens and the work that I do, something that doesn't have enough focus, or we haven't focused enough on, I believe, is youth in regards to housing and shelters. That's very profound with my community. Most of my youth get referred. And so if we could see more work focused on that moving forward, so those homeless youth can have places to go, not just affordable housing, homeowners and all that, or affordable rent, but literally the shelter systems, and developing that more.
Miigwech, Terrence, and I would encourage that as this committee hopefully gets renewed and opens up again, that there be spots held for youth. Not just one, but multiple youth. Youth feel more confident and comfortable in pairs. Next, I have Leslie.
Thank you so much again, Janice, for the opportunity. And I'd like to say, in addition to what Terence just said about bringing on queer youth, and I agree with Laura, queer youth in pairs, because it's a little intimidating when you get to this level of bureaucracy, or what you can even begin to understand. And also to include LGBTQI newcomers. We must have LGBTQI newcomers at this table. So Ranjit, I'm saving you from saying that. And to continue to have LGBT queer seniors. I'm going to use the word queer respectfully instead of saying the whole acronym. And I want to thank Kristen again. I know we said we're going to thank her, but I wanted, like officially in the minutes to thank Kristen and Laura for your excellent chairing. And I love how you have your little piece of analysis at the end of each item. It just, it's in a nutshell, you say things that just as the synthesis of what we need to be doing. So thank you for that skill and expertise, Laura. And thank you to the staff for their great support work. And I want to thank all of my colleagues who are sitting here. We are a powerful group sitting at this table. And we have the privilege of continuing to improving and saving the lives of our many 2S LGBTQI family, including LGBTQI newcomers. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege being on this community advisory board, and I certainly hope it will continue and that we can connect outside of these meetings on a regular basis also. I do not want us to lose this momentum.
Miigwech, Leslie. I will turn it to Susan.
Hi. Okay, my internet's gone down again. So the reason I came in person, because it's skill sets we need to learn. Oh, there we go. Do I look in the camera? There we go. I don't know if my computer's working or not, but I can see myself on the screen. First of all, thanking the fabulous, extraordinary background staff that helped us have these meetings. We did it online during a pandemic. So all of us, let's give ourselves 3 pats on the back, because 2 is not enough. I know how stressful it's been for me to figure out the technology, and without the staff support, that would have been even more challenging. I want to thank all the committee members and everyone, the diversity of this committee. I was really overwhelmed when I saw who was included. I wasn't the only trans person on the committee, so that made me feel good, but I think I got the trans elder status locked in, and I think we've only begun to do some of the work. The value of some of the policies and procedures. Do I have an echo? Okay. Just trying to mind the technology. My WebEx might have started while in the middle of my talk, or we got some feedback. Again, thanks to the technology people. The policies that came forward for us to review and give feedback on were of very important, significant importance for someone like myself. The ability of staff to take feedback and comments and to be able to even provide more, add to resolutions through motions, and evidence today that even though, a year and a half into the process, we had 2 members submit agenda items and spoke to it, and we approved it. So that really does say a lot. The one thing that I think we could maybe use improvement on is, and I am partly responsible for this, sometimes I'm in a meeting and I think we need to pass a motion. I think if there's a way, and if this committee is reconstituted, that there could be a deadline for, or perhaps the day before. I may not be able to meet that deadline, but I could try. Rather than try to move motions during the meeting, if we could maybe make suggestions prior to the meeting to help the staff in the motion writing process. That's one area I think I can certainly do better on, and I just wanted to make that as a potential recommendation going forward. I'm sorry that I'm not in person seeing you. I don't know if there's an opportunity. The city is structured. I was hoping we could meet, do a little lunch on the patio today, but I'm the one who showed up. But anyways, busy times. We will see some of you during Pride, and I just really want to wish everybody, staff, management, and members all a very happy Pride for the upcoming season. Oh, and thanking Laura for doing such an amazing job chairing the meeting. You could imagine how difficult that is. I can't get my laptop to work, so I forgot to mention you, and I apologize for that.
Miigwech, Susan. I was hoping to be in person with you, but health concerns mean I couldn't. Anyone else have any reflections in the moment? Oh, great. So I have Lori, Burka, and then Ranjith.
Thank you. I also want to express my appreciation to everybody involved. This has been a really excellent experience. I've learned so much, and especially from all of you, my co-members. The main thing that I would like to see is more opportunity to communicate and engage both with one another, like with co-members, as well as with the folks who come to present to us. So I know we've already talked about the possibility of being able to share email addresses, although respecting folks' privacy. I appreciate that might not work for everyone, but for those who feel able, I would really like to be able to be in touch with one another. And also when we have presenters come to the committee, I would find it really helpful to know exactly how I could contact that person after the meeting as well. But yeah, it's been a great experience, so thank you to all of you.
Miigwech Loi, Burka.
Yeah, I won't take up time just echoing what everyone has said, and like have learned so much from this group and this space, so thank you for that. I feel like just starting to build the comfort, and our term is coming up, and so definitely feeling that, and hopeful that the CAB in the next round will get together much sooner, so we do get almost a full term, because yeah, the city staff has been super supportive, but it takes a bit to build the comfort. And it's hilarious to hear Susan say that she's overwhelmed by the participation of who's on this table, but I definitely echo that of like the powerhouse group that's on this table. Also echoing the engagement piece, I think this might be a queer community thing. I don't know. I have to believe there's other CABs that feel similarly, because queer people, racialized people, I'm just like, you know, like yes, formal processes, but it feels hard to come to a meeting, sit and stare at each other 2 hours. And then it's been great to know that we generally align on everything, but it's like, I think the relationship building piece is important to our community, and it increases comfort as well. And so I think that piece, especially if young people are being brought in and more community folks, like many of us hold titles and are expected to perform through our imposter syndromes or whatever we want to call it, but really how do we make space for the entire group? So thinking of that, would love something closing. I know that's impossible to ask. Please don't schedule something in June because I don't know how many of us will actually show up, but I'd love to see all of your faces in person in July or August. And then the only other thing I will name, and I think this is a city issue across the board, is access, which is that the expectation that folks can be in a 2.5-hour, 3-hour meeting without any breaks is a pretty unrealistic one. I don't know how you all do it as city councilors and such, so I know this is across the board, but it puts a lot of pressure. I sit with my Bluetooth so I can step away, you know, like even if there's ways to incorporate breaks, like I can't imagine people with, depending on the range of disabilities or learning abilities, like I can't imagine this being a space that could really be accessible for a lot of people. So that would be my last piece, but thank you all.
Miigwech. Ranjith.
Yes, thank you so much again, and for the city staff whose incredible work, a lot of work has gone into coming out this support that you are getting, that we are getting to be here, and I want to acknowledge that. being inspired by Leslie and Susan and many others, I don't know whether this is the time, but I would like to highlight the urgency, perhaps to create, not perhaps, absolutely to create a two-spirit LGBTQ plus long-term care home. Now, I am also inspired by the advocacy work for 2S LGBTQ plus youth that had happened and leading to spaces like the Friends of Ruby. So we need, while we are training the mainstream long-term care homes and service providers in those spaces, I think it is an urgent endeavor to take on the task of creating a two-spirit LGBTQ plus long-term care home. It is absolutely important, and it could proliferate. It could get the support from the private sector, public sector, joint initiative, but with the political leadership, it is important. And I also want to echo Burka's last comment about the people who are disabled, 2S LGBTQ plus people who are in the disability spectrum or differently able spectrum, getting visibilized again and again. Their voices also need to be heard, and they also need to be centered in these spaces. Thank you.
Miigwech. And Leslie.
I just wanted to respond to two quick things. First of all, Burka, I definitely agree. I had to go to the bathroom. So, yeah, and that's been a concern of mine, that even a 5-minute break would be helpful. All of my long meetings, we get at least a 5-minute break. And the other piece I wanted to respond to Ranjith, Rakai long-term care centers. We are having a big in-person queer seniors intergenerational party, a pride party on Saturday, June the 18th from 1 to 4 p.m. I'm going to send the poster to Janice and ask Janice to send it out to everybody. This Rakai is the only long-term care home in Canada that has designated 25 beds to 2S LGBTQI seniors. They've done all their inclusion training. There's an accountability mechanism in place. I've been working with them closely on this initiative since 2015. And Rakai now has a waiting list of 2S LGBTQI seniors because that is now the place to go. And our hope is, with my motion going forward, that the city's 10 long-term care homes will also be a good safe haven for our communities to go. So I just wanted to point that out. And I agree with everybody. We need to have a party July or August, not during Pride, because we are all busy during June. So Janice and the staff, thank you again. And now I'm asking you to plan a little party for us.
This is our community. We do enjoy a gathering. Do I have any other speakers? And I'm sure they will take more input afterwards as well. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Laura. I just wanted to thank everybody. I really appreciated everybody's hard work and dedication and your input. I've learned so much on this committee, and I'm looking forward to seeing it reconstituted in the next term, and I'll be putting my name forward again. I just certainly want to thank everybody. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Miigwech.
Wonderful. I appreciate everyone's input so much, and as mentioned to everyone here, thank you so much for your time and commitment, and that goes to the city staff as well who have supported us. I know that I have felt supported throughout this whole process whenever I needed help, so I really appreciate that. I think that something that really resonated with me is that there is opportunities to decolonize this process a little bit. Our communities and Indigenous communities center community and relationships very highly. And we have done an incredibly good job considering the situation with the pandemic, but allowing there to be informal space and considering the meeting structures and how folks are needed to perform within the meeting structure could be a space and an opportunity for change as well. With that, we come to the end of our meeting. That was all of the items on our agenda. The last piece that I'm going to ask for people to vote on is a motion to excuse absences. So for those of our members who are not able to be in attendance today, can we please display the motion on the screen? Oh, I was told I thought we did not need a motion for the last one, but we totally did. And so let me go backwards for a second. Do I have someone, do I have a motion to receive the item for QS 6.7? Great, Burka. So I have a motion from Burka. All those in favor? Wonderful, that was everyone, so the motion carries.
Thank you all.
Now, a motion to excuse absences. You always leave your mistakes to the end. That's the way to do it. So may I, all those in favor of excusing the absences? Wonderful, motion carries. So before we adjourn today, I very much wanted to say, Miigwech, thank you. This is our last meeting of this term for council. Both staff and myself are so incredibly thankful for the labor, the effort, the space, the emotional vulnerability to be here and be part of this committee. We know how much you are committed to the 2S LGBTQI community, and it carries in how you folks show up in this space. I also want to note that the new term for the council, when this committee is struck again, we will encourage everyone to reapply if that is something that you would like to do. And if you have any questions regarding the appointment or application process, please contact the Public Appointment Secretariat at appointment@toronto.ca or 416-397-0088. And I'm going to say Bamapi, which in Ojibwe means we will see each other again. Our paths will cross. So we don't say goodbye. It's too finite. We will always see each other again. So Bamapi, everyone. And this concludes our business for today. Thank you for participating, and the meeting is adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.